It's a great day to be alive in Murrieta, California. Sun-kissed, and this past week, snow-capped, mountain-girded, Pacific-cooled, community-oriented, and servant-led. It's a blessing to be with you this day. I think all of you know that the Cole family is in Denver because Doug's dad passed away this past week, so the entire family has gone to be with him. And the rest of the family. And welcome back, university students. We've missed you for the last 4 months. I noticed 4 or 5 here. There may be more. So we're glad that you are here. I'm the fourth choice, as you know. After all of our 2 of our ministers are away, and Brother Bert is teaching back in the back with our Spanish congregation. And so when that happens, they call upon Rich or someone else. And thank you to Ted last week, who led us. Wasn't that a wonderful lesson that he gave to us with his own testimony? And if you missed the program last night, you should come next year, because our kids' program was, am I on this one now? Okay, there we go. Good. Was just fantastic. And with the sign language that they did 3 or 4 songs in sign language. But if you missed it, come next week, because next Sunday we're going to be going through Luke 1 and 2, and we're going to have the kids come up here. We'll tell them a little story, and then they're going to do one of those songs with the sign language. And so come next week, and you'll be blessed by it. But you really missed a solo last night, in that Jade Mitchell did the Song of Mary right into a microphone, and it was really, really cool. It was a highlight of the whole program. And I hope we can include something like that in the program next year. There was a good group here, but I encourage all the rest of you who missed it, come on this Saturday night around the 15th or 16th when the kids do their program. Well, congrats to Matthew Costa and to Jake Romans as well. We attended the Vista Murrieta High School Christmas program last Wednesday night, and they both had solos. Jake did his horn, and Matthew had a solo on one of the songs, and they just blew the audience away. It was fantastic. And so if you can support our young people when they do things in the community, they represent us. Even though the Murrieta Church of Christ was not mentioned, they represent us. And they did just a wonderful job. And welcome back to those that were in Mexico last week. There were 58 who went to Ensenada and Mañadero last week from about 2 or 3 different congregations, and they ministered to those children there. But they are back with us now, and so welcome back. Care of my sins. He paid my debt. My debt was owed, and he paid that debt. So that's the first thing that came to mind. He came to teach his disciples. He came to prepare them to carry on his ministry. He came to heal and to rescue the downtrodden. But as we're going to look today, he also came to demonstrate to you and to me how to carry on a conversation. We're going to look at John 4 in just a few moments. I shared this passage with the auditorium Bible class last April when we were looking at Jesus and the role that he played with women. And we looked at it very briefly there. I want to expand upon that and just look in detailed fashion how Jesus carried on a simple conversation, but also was something very profound. Because when he talked to disciples, when he talked to the downcast, when he talked to the outcast, when he talked to the Pharisees, even when he talked to Pilate, and when he talked to Herod, he had the perfect words in every conversation. From the time that he was 12 years old until the time of his crucifixion, he had the words that spoke into people's hearts. And that's who I want to be. And that's who I hope that you want to be, is someone who can carry on a conversation with those around you. So let's look at one example today of how Jesus treated people. Let's look at John 4. Thank you. If you can do verse 4, that first passage. Jesus has just finished some of his time down in Jerusalem, and he's about to go back up to Galilee. And if you look at John 4, the first 4 verses, it says that he had to pass through Samaria. Or the New International says he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well, and it was about noon. And what's interesting is one word in that passage in verse 4. John, 70 years later, 50 years later, somewhere around there, is writing about this experience, and he says that Jesus had to go through Samaria. Because the typical route when you're going from Galilee down to Jerusalem or Jerusalem back up to Galilee was to go across the Jordan on the east side and then up the east side of the Jordan and then back over into Galilee. Why? Because they didn't like the Samaritans. They didn't want to go through that territory because the Samaritans were half-breeds. They were the ones when the Assyrians came in, 500 years earlier. When the Assyrians came in, they took some of those northern 10 tribes and moved them off to other countries, and they moved some of those other countries back into Assyria, and so they intermarried. And so the Jews did not like the Samaritans. They were the butt of all the jokes. But Jesus chose to go through Samaria. He didn't do the typical route around the outside of the Jordan River to get back up to Galilee. And that just speaks worlds to me. The Samaritans were despised in the entire land of Palestine. Remember when the 10 lepers were healed by Jesus and only one of them came back to say thanks? And Jesus goes, the 10, where are they? There's only one back, and that one is a Samaritan? It was almost like, why is the fourth class citizen, the fifth class citizen, the only one who was able to say thanks? That's one time when the Samaritans are mentioned. I'll mention another one in a minute. But he chooses to go through Samaria. Do you choose to go to difficult situations, difficult places? I sure don't. I like my comfort. I like my house. I like to watch the Hallmark Channel with my wife. Even though I'd rather be watching sports or something else, I like that comfort. I don't choose to go out into the place where the drug pushers are, or the ones who are being abused. But Jesus chooses to go through Samaria and to do the difficult things. And I'll give an example from 2 weeks ago. Many of you know Jim Sizer and how faithful he is in assembling with us. Well, 2 weeks ago, he was on the 215 coming down this way, and he was going by Scott Road, where they're doing all that construction, and one of his tires blew. And it was spreading rubber all over the place. And he couldn't pull over because they've narrowed it with those K-rails, right? So he had to drive for a half mile to get to a place where he could pull over. And so he pulls over, and it's around 8:30 in the morning, and he says, okay, where's that spare on his big van? And he looks, and it's way underneath, and he's digging down there and trying to figure out how to get that spare out, and a car pulls over. And it's Randy and Lydia Mars. And they say, can we help you? And so they spent 3 hours getting that spare off of the bottom and over and finding a jack and fixing the thing. So I asked Jim 2 days later at our house group, I said, hey, we missed you on Sunday. He says, I was visited by angels. Isn't that a cool response? And so they chose to do something that was difficult, right? Was it easy? No. Did they get dirty? Yeah. Was it the right thing to do? Yeah. They were Jesus. They were angels to Jim at that point. Okay. Let's look at the next slide, verse 6. Oh, there, sorry. Look at this one here. You can see Sychar is right there in the purple section. And Jerusalem's kind of in the middle of the green. And so the typical way was to go around this way and back up to Galilee. But it's about halfway up to get to Galilee. It's about 35 miles. Okay, let's look at verse 6 then, Brent. So Jesus was tired, and he sat down. He was, when I walk 2 miles, I'm tired. I used to do 10Ks before my knees went bad, and when 10K is what, 6.2 miles? I'm tired just after a couple of miles, or just leaf blowing my house for half an hour. I'm tired. I want to sit down. I want to rest. But here Jesus walks 35 miles. I don't know if it was all in one day or 2 days, but he walks 35 miles. His disciples go into town, and he sits down by the well, and it's time to rest and not have a conversation, right? That's what I want to do after exercising or working. But instead, he initiates a conversation with a Samaritan woman, and that just speaks volumes to me. Then verse 7. In that initiation, even though he was exhausted, something really wonderful took place. When the Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" It's kind of easy to have conversations about the weather and about sports or the Rams or the Chargers or, for Rich Dawson, the 49ers, who are finally having a good year. It's easy to have conversations like that. But to initiate a conversation and then go into something deeper is something that's a lot tougher. But Jesus was our example for that. Landon Saunders, who is the voice of Heartbeat, the Herald of Truth program from the 70s and 80s, said one time in a speech that we had him give up in Santa Barbara, he said, the reason he loves Jesus is because he initiated and he intervened. What two great I words there. He initiated and he intervened. When he saw people who were downtrodden, he stepped in and he spoke for them, like the woman who was caught in adultery. When he saw that there was a problem, he spoke up. He initiated and he intervened. That's what I need to be in my life. I need to be an initiator. When I'm in a chance where I can have a conversation with someone, ask a simple question like, can I have a glass of water? And then that can lead to talking like Jesus did about living water. But we're so afraid about intruding on others' lives that we don't do that. We don't initiate. We don't intervene. One of the quietest times in your life when you're around other people, think about that. Think about when you're out in public and yet everybody is quiet. For me, it's elevators. We've been a lot of, in the last few years, we've been in hospitals a lot. And you get into those hospitals at Kaiser and there's 5, 6, 7, 8 people and everyone is silent. They're afraid to say anything, right? It's some of the quietest times of my life and everybody is uncomfortable, right? Well, Jesus, in this uncomfortable situation with a fourth-class person, chose to initiate and to ask for a cup of water. We need to be like Grace or Mickey Bates or Marilyn Rollins, who are waiting in line with for food or something else, and they always seem to come up with a great line to talk to somebody there. I wish I were better at that. I'm silent when I'm waiting in line. I don't want to intrude on another person, but they come back to our house group and they tell these wonderful stories, great conversations that they have with someone just while waiting in line at the grocery store. I think we need to try to be like that. Let's go down and look at verse 9 now, because this is the heart of this passage. So she says to him, the Samaritan woman said to him, "Hey, you're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" And then John, writing 70 years later, in case we didn't get how significant this was, notice the parentheses that the translators put around there, because it's a commentary that John is doing here. He says, "For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." If you guys read the Old Testament, you'll know that Ezra and Nehemiah is all about that. Remember when the Jews came back, when Cyrus allowed them to come back in? And then they started to reinstitute the priesthood. And all these people who could not show that they were pure-blooded children of Levi tried to say, "Hey, I'll be a priest." And they couldn't show their family records. And so that whole Ezra and Nehemiah are all about that. And so they looked down on those people who had intermarried with the other cultures. Well, in time of Jesus, 600 years later, the same thing is happening. Those pure-blood Jews are looking down on Samaritans. And this woman feels that. She says, how can you, a Jew, talk to me, a Samaritan? She is shocked by Jesus' initiation. This water request, however, has an even deeper meaning for me. Did Jesus carry around his little metal bottle of water, back in 29, 28, 27 AD? Did he carry around his own water jug? No. He's there by himself. And he asked this woman to give him a drink. What does that mean? He's going to be sharing the jug with this woman. So not only is he talking to this woman, he's going to be putting his mouth on the same bottle that she uses. So this fourth-class citizen is going to be equal to the Lord of the universe. That's why she's so shocked. What? You're asking me for a drink? You're going to be sharing this water bottle with me? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Now let's go to verse 9. Jews don't do this. And then Jesus says in verse 10, Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. His question then is a seed-sowing question. He's starting to have a conversation. Yeah, Jews don't associate with Samaritans, but there's something more important than just this daily water that you're having to hike out of Sychar and go to this well and get the water and hike back. He says, maybe we should talk about living water. He was throwing out bait. How many of you are fishermen? I know of at least 5. Okay, maybe 6. There's 7, 8. Mike Swagger and Jim Sizer and Randy Mars have gone to the lakes around here to fish for bass, and they use lures and sometimes shad. Zell and I, though, go up to the Sierras and we fish for trout, which is a little bit smaller fish than those bass that these guys catch. But we use crickets. Both are bait. They're both to try to attract that fish to come and grab onto that lure or onto that bait so that we can catch them. That's what Jesus is doing here. Maybe we should talk about living water. And that gets the conversation on a deeper level. And can we do that? If there's somebody at work and they're new to your community, or you're new to their community, I know some of the people here got new jobs recently. Can you talk to somebody at the job site and say, so what do people like around here? That's a seed-sowing question. It gets them to talk not just about the Rams or the Chargers or the Niners. It gets them to talk about relationships with people. What do people like around here? Or this is one that came up in our house group, our real-life discipleship group last Sunday. If you're having lunch, as we all do, with someone at work, it's just so easy to say, do you mind if I give a blessing for the food? Are they going to say no to that? They're not going to say no to that. But it's going to let them know that you're a person of faith, and perhaps then later on you can have a conversation about faith. So let's go down to verse 16. So they have this conversation about living water, and then he tells her, go call your husband and come back. And that kind of shakes her up, doesn't it? Why? Because she's already had 5 husbands and she's on her 6th. Okay? Go call your husband and come back. And she doesn't know exactly what to say about that. And she says, well, I don't really have a husband. That's because she's living without one. And you know what Jesus does? He doesn't blast her. He praises her. He says, you are right. You're not with a husband right now. You're on number 6. And that's something I need to do. When I'm having a conversation with someone and something difficult comes up, I need to praise them. If they say something that is, at least somewhat close to the truth, praise them for that. Give them props for coming up with that. Then skip down to verse 21, or 20 and 21. She brings up a distraction. When you're talking to someone and it gets to be something on a deeper level, are they happy about talking about something on a deeper level? Probably not. They're going to throw up smoke screens. They're going to try to distract you. And I'm easily distracted. So she says, you know what? Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain here, up near Sychar. But you Jews claim that the place where we're supposed to worship is down in Jerusalem. And he does not get distracted. He uses that to get across the point of the conversation. He says, woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor on this mountain, but you will be worshiping in spirit and in truth. When I'm conversing with someone, I can easily get distracted. Jesus does not get distracted. He brings her to revelation. That spirit and truth that we sang about just a few moments ago is what it's all about. Now go to verse 23 and 24. Time is coming when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. And then verse 25, there's one more distraction. The woman goes, I know that this Messiah, the one that's called Christ, and this is another commentary by John, the one called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. And then what does Jesus say to him? He goes, ego eimi. Ego eimi. The same words that were spoken to Moses at the burning bush. Ego eimi. And John uses that phrase, ego eimi, about 13 times in his gospel. Ego eimi, the shepherd, good shepherd. Ego eimi, I am the door. Ego eimi, the way, the truth, and the life. And if this phrase were translated a little bit better, it might be this way. I am is speaking to you. And if she knew anything about I am from the book of Exodus, that would be a powerful, powerful witness to her. I am is speaking to you. So, let's go back to Jesus, the barrier breaker. The disciples come up at that time, and she drops her jar and runs back into town to tell everybody that she has just found the Messiah. Is the next slide on there? Is that the one that yeah. You may not be able to see it very well. I went on the internet and tried to find some pictures of Jesus and the woman at the well, and this is the best one, I thought. There were all kinds of ones that were done during the Italian Renaissance, and everybody was wearing Italian clothes, and and makeup, and it might have ministered to the people of that time, but it didn't minister to me. This one is probably more typical. The well is outside of the city. She had to hike out there every day. And so notice that one of her feet is up in the air. She's running back because she just met the Messiah. She's running back to tell everyone else, you got to come out and meet this guy, Jesus. Is it possible that he's the Messiah? But then the disciples then distract Jesus too. They go, here's some food, Jesus. And he starts talking about, a different kind of food. And they're going, did you feed him? I didn't feed him. Did the woman feed him? They're all confused. What food is he talking about? Okay, let's go to the next verse. The disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, what do you want? Or why are you talking with her? And then the next one. And he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. The disciples, even after the resurrection, and he's about to go up into heaven, they're asking Jesus, so you're going to start the kingdom now? He's about ready to go up into heaven, and they still can't figure it out. They're confused for that whole 3 years. One of the best lines, I've told this to you before, one of the best lines from the rock musical, Jesus Christ Superstar, is when the disciples are going, what's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. That's what's going on here. Huh? Did you bring him food? Did you bring him food? But instead what happens is all those people from the town come out to see Jesus. And the disciples were looking down, I think, at the Samaritans. He is saying to them, you guys wanted to go around the outside and get up to Galilee that way. I chose to come here. You saw Sychar as a pit stop just a place to buy some bread and then to continue on our journey. But there's something more important going on here, and that's the fact that salvation can come to these Samaritans. So who are the outcasts of our society? Who are the ones you don't want to spend time with? Who are the ones that I don't want to spend time with? Is it those who live in rat-infested homes? Is it those who are addicted to various things? Is it those who are violent? Is it those who live in poverty? Is it the single moms? Who are the outcasts around you? Do you like spending time with them? That's a challenge for me to spend time with them. But that's who Jesus spends time with. He is an intentional, conversational leader, whereas I tend to be one who sticks with convention, with what is status quo, with what is easy, instead of doing the things that are difficult. Okay, so let's summarize with the 9 things we have said today. Go on to the list then. What can we do? Number 1, we can ask simple questions, like Jesus did, about water. 2, we could begin speaking even when we were tired. Okay, that's hard to do, but it's what Jesus did. 3, we can begin doing unconventional things, even radical things. Jesus was a radical. We have to remember that. He was a radical for his time. Can we be radical in the Murrieta Valley? And then 4, we can build curiosity with our creative questions. We can listen. We can compliment when appropriate. We can not get distracted. That's the tough one for me. And then number 8, on the next slide, we can get to the real issue, which is Messiah, Spirit, truth. And then Jesus, at the conclusion, talking with his disciples, says, look around. The fields are white to the harvest. Pray to the Lord of harvest to send forth reapers. They did not see Sychar as a place of harvest. They see it as a byway, as a pit stop, as a something to avoid. We need to look at Murrieta, at Canyon Lake, at Menifee, at Hemet, at Temecula, as a place of ministry, not as a place to avoid. So Jesus was a radical for his time, so much so counterculture that they killed him for it. Can you think of people in the 20th century who were so radical that they were martyred for it? Think who you think of the past 100 years who was such a radical, a change of culture, that they were murdered. First one I thought of was Mohandas Gandhi. I mean, he was in South Africa, got his law degree, and then went back to India, and basically by non-violence and fasting, kicked out the Brits, who had dominated that colonial country for years and years and years. The second one's easier. Who do you think I'm thinking of next? Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, talk about someone who was radical, who used fasting and nonviolence to persuade a very bigoted Congress that they needed to enact laws that would bring a chance for equality to the peoples of our country. Can you be a Gandhi? Can you be a king in 21st century America? Are there wrongs that need to be righted? Can you stand up for the downtrodden and be their voice? Can you be like Jesus and just ask simple questions like a cup of water? Can you see those around you not as a culture says that they are, but as if you are looking at them through Jesus' eyes and treat them with dignity? If you can, you'll be a barrier breaker, just like Jesus was, and the world around you will change. Will it be easy? No, it won't be easy. Will you be criticized? Yeah, you'll probably be criticized. Will you get dirty like Randy and Lydia and Jim did trying to fix that tire? Yeah, you'll get dirty. But you'll be breaking down barriers in the community by doing the unconventional, doing the radical. So, during this Christmas season, can you do something different? Can you work in a soup kitchen? Can you give a gift to someone that you don't even know? Can you make it a daily practice rather than a once-a-year practice? So today I'd like you to see Jesus as he walked and talked on the earth and the way he treated the downtrodden and the disrespected. I'd like you to see Jesus as the great conversationalist that he was and make it a daily practice. If you can do that, and I can do that, there'll be nothing to stop us in this community except our own fears of our inadequacies. We need to see Jesus through Jesus' eyes, that these fields around us are white for harvest. It is what he asked his disciples to do, but they could not do it. They did not yet have the Spirit. They only saw their need for food. How about you today? Are you able to see past your need for food and water and able to talk about living water? Are you ready to be a harvester? Are you ready to die to yourself and rise to walk a new life by being born again? You know, John records in the 3rd chapter Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus. And Nicodemus was someone who knew the law because he was part of the Sanhedrin. And he told Nicodemus, you need to be born again. Huh? What? Born again? I can't go back into the womb, can I? No, you need to be born of water and the Spirit. When is it that we as humans are born of water and the Spirit? It's when we die to self in baptism. If you've not been baptized, we'd love to talk to you about that. Or if you've been baptized and you've been out of favor with God and want to talk to one of the elders, they're standing in the back, and they'd be happy to talk with you. It's a great song we're going to sing, On Bended Knee I Come, and there's a great phrase in it, worship you in spirit, I worship you in truth. Let's stand as we sing.